Welcome to Framework. This is John, one of the hosts of Framework, welcoming you back to a conversation we've already started on the end of Mass Effect 3. This is the second part of that conversation. This is where we talk about the actual end of the game. One of the most controversial, well, frankly, one of the most detested endings in the history of video games. And we finally, after talking about these games for several years now, have got to the final moments of it. So that is what this conversation is about. If you missed the first part of it, it is, it's the last thing we published on Mass Effect. But this is the end of it. Please enjoy.
All right, so now you're up on the Citadel, and it is a charnel house of horrors, and Anderson has somehow followed you up, but landed in a different spot. Things are getting a little wonky here at the end. This is what people sort of complain about. But
I love this first bit here. The first thing that happens with Anderson and the elusive man, excellent, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you make your way to a control panel where you're supposed to activate the crucible. And Anderson's there, but he is sort of being controlled, puppeteered by an elusive man who has sort of new biotic powers with his Reaper implants that he has done. And he is still ranting and raving at you about, you can't destroy them. We can control them and make them our puppets, and humanity will be so powerful, and blah, 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 blah. So Anderson's up there. The Reaper man, elusive man, has got his Reaper implants and is sort of puppeteering him. And you have your final confrontation there where you can kind of try and talk him out of his megalomaniacal brainwash scheme, which, of course, as is tradition in a Mass Effect game, success in that means you convince him to kill himself.
Yeah. A little predictable, perhaps, but... frankly, the visuals and the performance pull this off really well. The location of this it's sort of looking out onto a corridor of not a corridor, a giant monolith of light. I guess that's how you describe it. Just tons and tons of electronical energy flowing to one position. It's a giant. I don't know. It's what Palpatine gets thrown into at the end of Return of the Jedi or something like that. And
there's that. The backdrop though is the arms of Citadel have closed, and the arms of Citadel all have like cities built on them. So it's like skyscrapers, and so we're used to seeing them sort of lit up, but with space between them. And now it's just sort of a solid wall of this, bright light on black. And when you open them up later, it's a very cool visual too.
There's like tens of thousands of people in there, right?
Well, the implication is that they're all killed.
During
all this.
Okay. And the elusive man looks great. He's got like a bunch of biomechanical body parts now, with a lot of like evil robot rot coming out of each of the spots, like especially his eyeball. It's great.
And they said performance. It's Keith David and Martin Sheen.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and Anderson. I mean, we've talked about how great Keith David is in this. To make him central to the end of the game is a great choice, and it kind of allows you to luxuriate in how much you enjoy this character too. He ends up being more important than all your comrades, I guess, at least in how things play out, which I guess was probably a thing that pissed people off, is how little they're involved. But, Anderson...
in the very end,
has weight for me. He has the juice, so it works for me.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, that's partly by design. They have to... Because all your other companions could have been killed by now.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has been plot armored by virtue of... They never want you to have your daddy figure, like, looking over your shoulder on the ship. So he's somebody you check in with a lot, but he's not there for the game and you can't get him killed any time prior. And maybe there's a better version of this where it could be your companions there if they're still alive, and he's sort of a backup if A and B and C have already been killed. But
I want Anderson there. I think this is great. I think it's really cool to have this character have a massive pillar of the final act here and be significant in that way, because he's been here since the beginning. He's always had this sort of this important mentor role, and he's not brushed aside. He becomes part of the arc at the end, and it's great. And it's more Keith David. It's more Keith David in the end of your game. So for fuck's sake, yeah.
And it's two kind of Shepard's father figures there,
right?
That are it's also sort of the angel and devil on their shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
There is a symmetry there that it wouldn't work if it was Garrus necessarily. One way or the other, you kill the elusive man here. There's no boss fight. It's dialogue wheel stuff, like you said. Mm-hmm. And then you activate the crucible. It opens up the arms. They can, or you open up the arms of the Citadel so they can bring in the crucible. And you and Anderson sit down in your bloody, battered state. Anderson,
beautiful.
The elusive man forced you biotically to shoot Anderson earlier, so he's now mortally wounded too. And you sit there, and he tells you he's proud of you as you look down at Earth, and then he dies. And Shepard kind of passes out. But then you get woken up by Hackett coming over your radio saying that it's not working, and they can't figure out what's wrong. And Shepard gets raised up to talk to the Star Child, which is where the controversy and hate really come through.
Yeah. How to sum this up? This is okay. It is the ghost child that you've been having visions of all through Mass Effect 3. The Vancouver kid killed in the vent, or not in the vent. The vent kid who was blown up.
Disappeared in a vent, was blown up in a shuttle.
At the beginning of the game, and has haunted Shepard in the dark forest of perception ever since. He is now reappears as a ghost figure, the representation of the Crucible, which is I guess appearing as it's David Morrison Contact. It's just like, I'm a familiar face, so we can have a conversation with an abstract idea.
Well, he's the representation of the catalyst, by the way. You messed up your proper C noun, or proper nouns with C's.
Shit. Yeah, you're right.
So what he lays out is that the Reapers do what they do, kill off all advanced organic life every 50,000 years, because if they don't, then organics will create artificial intelligence that will then proceed to wipe out all organic life. And to avoid that, they do this, culling process so that new organic species can arise up until they reach this ceiling where they would kill themselves off by creating evil robots. And that's when the other evil robots come in to kill everybody off. The logic is a bit circular, but, I can roll with this as a motivation.
It's a culling. Yeah, that's a trope in and of itself. I mean, every version of, the Asimov's 3 laws kind of comes down to some version of this, like, well, we have to protect humans from hurting themselves. And the way we will do this is by killing humans,
Right.
It's that thing. So, a science fiction trope, as it were. And it is kind of based, obviously, in, the eternal conflict between man and machine, another sort of science fiction idea. And ultimately what it turns out Mass Effect as a whole is about.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
Like I said, I can roll with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it does, you can kind of tell that this was decided on midstream. It wasn't the original idea. If there was an original idea, a lot of times.
Dark matter on that one planet, maybe something to do with that. That doesn't sound inherently better, though. I'll tell you.
I think that was what the first idea, whether it was in place in Mass Effect 1 or not. By 2, they were trying to build up the idea that, like using the Mass Effect fields, mass relay system is creating like more dark energy that is unstable and will destroy the entirety of the universe if it goes on unchecked. And we basically have to stop using the mass relays, which could have been fine. Maybe it could have been better. I don't know. I'm not against this whole AI thing as a concept anymore. I think it's interesting now in a different way in 2024 than it was in 2012, where, again, the idea of, as we talked about previously, the idea of AI then was more just like, well, what if they're an oppressed minority group?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we have to interact with it. And now that AI is becoming more of a actuality we might have to face, I don't know. I think there was a lot of hype around AI recently, and it still could be disastrous for us in a lot of ways. But I think calling it artificial intelligence might be overselling it at this point.
We're going to get there, though. It's going to be way better than us before we die.
Well, yeah, that's it's a whole thing, but it's a giant step, leap forward in computing power. But I don't know that it's gotten a lot closer to actual intelligence the way that Edie is intelligent, and
sure,
it can scrape a lot of data and imitate things, but it's not very good at creating things or innovating things so far. It's been what I've encountered. But let's talk about it in terms of Mass Effect for now, because what they lay out for us here, the Star Child lays out a couple of options, and depending on your war assets, you will have more or less options. So option one is actually destroy the Reapers, as planned. Send out a giant pulse that will destroy the entire system of Mass Effect relays, but will also kill off all synthetic life, which includes the Reapers, also includes the Geth if they're still alive, also includes Edie. And she says we'll include Shepard as well, since Shepard has so many cybernetic implants from the Lazarus Project. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of door number one. Door number two is control the Reapers, like the Elusive Man wanted to do. But apparently the Catalyst tells you he could not do that because we had already indoctrinated him. But you're not indoctrinated, so you actually could pull it off. There's some gobbledygook about how, nobody's ever made it this far before, and now that you have, it's changed the parameters of our system, blah, blah, so we're going to allow you this choice. Again, we always have to, every mission, including the final thing of the game, has to come down to Shepard making a dialogue wheel choice.
Yep.
Now, if your lore assets are low enough, you only get access. You don't get a choice here. You can only do one or the other, and it's destroy if you destroy the collector base at the end of Mass Effect 2, and apparently it's control if you kept the collector base at the end of Mass Effect 2.
Interesting. Okay.
But most people, even if they do just kind of a bare minimum of content, will still get the choice between those two. Then there was a third option that was available if you reached a higher war asset threshold of synthesis, where it says you will Shepard will die, but it will combine organic and synthetic life across the galaxy in such a way where there will no longer be in conflict.
A lot of questions about that. Yeah.
Yes.
Transhumanism. Absolutely. Which I don't know about you. I think that's probably the way things are headed in the real world. If we're not to die, all of us just extinct at some point in the near future, then yeah, we'll probably all become cyborgs at some point. And we, to the point where it's just gonna be a necessity, and we won't have a stigma about it anymore.
I mean, my phone may as well already be grafted to my hand or face.
Yeah. At this point. Within our lifetimes, we've seen massive strides towards it. So yeah, I think we're headed that way. Yeah.
Maybe. But this is just nonsense. And,
it's nonsense. It's total nonsense.
But we'll weigh them all. There's also a fourth option that was added in the extended cut after their initial release, because people were objected. People really did not like this set of choices.
Is it the choices, you think, that turn people off so much? Is it the choices themselves, or is it the way it is executed? I mean, it's both, I guess.
Yes.
But of the two, I think it's the execution is the bigger problem.
Yes, I would say so. But people griped about it so much that they did a lot of things, like the extended cut. And one of the things they added was people said, well, if you don't like these choices, there's a choice now, or an option not to choose any of them and just let things play out, which the game plays out. It's like, okay, well, that means the Reapers kill everybody. And that's how it ends. What's interesting about that, I actually, and people hated that ending because there's something almost a little spiteful about it.
Oh, it's a fuck you, no question.
So it just kind of fades out if you with Shepard looking out the window at all the ships exploding, and then you see a sort of cut to an underground vault where Liara has hidden her, Encyclopedia Mass Effectica that she has compiled as a message for future cycles. To like, here's the history of our war with the Reapers and everything we tried and all that. And in the initial version, that was the last you saw. I mean, it was a very heavy implication that all life was wiped out. But maybe there's a little bit of hope for some future cycle to do better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe they'll figure it out. Yeah.
In the Legendary Edition, they added actually, even after that, after the credits, the sort of coda that people also don't like, which in the other endings, it's Buzz Aldrin talking to some alien child in the distant future about the shepherd. And
wild shit.
Yeah. Oh, it's fine. I like it.
I like it too. It's great. It's so weird though. It's just like and you don't know it's Buzz Aldrin. You don't know Buzz Aldrin's voice. It's just
exactly
an old man who's not an actor. It's what it sounds like.
But if you do the no choice ending, they do that same scene. It's not Buzz Aldrin's voice. It's just some lady voice. Sounds like any of the Asaris. But it does indicate that, yeah, the next cycle after you did pull this off, even though Shepard did not.
Oh, I didn't. That's sort of it's a touch of Dark Tower ending to it. I kind of like that, yes. Actually. I like the thing where Shepard tells the Star Child to fuck off. That's fun. And the Star Child has an evil voice all of a sudden, and he says, "So be it."
It has Harbinger's voice.
Yeah.
That will lead us into the indoctrination theory, but which we'll talk about shortly. Because I do think that of these four options, basically there are two functional endings and two completely non-functional that I've never. I mean, I think the very first time I was playing through in the original version before it was extended, it was still, I was so just kind of unclear on what was happening in a lot of cases that I kind of defaulted to like, I guess I'll do the green one since that is the unlockable ending. And
that's the one they want you to do.
Should be the best one. So
yes,
I guess I'll do that. And I immediately was like, well, this sucks.
Yeah.
And I reloaded the save and I guess I'll do destroy.
Exactly what I did. Exactly what I did. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I think in modern times, like all my playthroughs now will either end with the reject ending or the destroy ending.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay.
My Paragon rejected it. My Renegade destroyed them all.
The transhumanism ending, I do think is kind of like brazen and sort of, I don't know. It goes into a weird 2001 place for me where I'm just sort of like, well, what if it's just crazy now? What if the ending is wild and esoteric and doesn't make sense anymore? It's almost a thematic ending. It's like The Fountain or something, you know, it just kind of doesn't. Yeah. And that is not satisfying. Tower, that's not satisfying. It's not the right ending for this kind of story and this kind of thing, but it's a swing.
Yeah. 2001 or The Dark Tower, which you mentioned, those are headier, trippier texts in the lead up to their finales.
Exactly.
Than this. But there's also the problem with the transhumanism green ending is
it's nonsense.
It's logistically nonsense.
Yeah, it's absolute nonsense.
What are we saying happens here? It's implanting robotics inside every organic being in a galaxy with an energy pulse.
Yeah. And that is represented by sort of a green wash that looks somewhat mechanical, just on everybody. Everyone's kind of got like a little bit of a robot-y look after this.
Yeah. So trees are now robots, and the Geth, I guess, are like spontaneously growing fingernails or something, like because they now have to have an organic component.
I mean, there's many questions. You what about probiotic bacteria in your stomach? Does that how does that play out exactly? You know, like there's many questions that they just decided that you know what, it's not even worth trying to answer. Like, forget about it.
Yeah, setting aside all the logistics and taking it kind of at face value, it's still a horrendous violation of every sentient being in the galaxy simultaneously.
Absolutely.
On like an unfathomable level.
Yeah, you have no idea what the implications of this are. You don't know what hells you're inviting on
no one
hundreds
has
of thousands
consented to be to changing their species.
Can no one die anymore? Is that what's going on?
Yeah. It is a galaxy-wide rape of everybody's DNA. Like, I'm not using that word to be hyperbolic. I can't possibly overstate how horrific I find this concept if you take it at all seriously.
Well, you can't take it seriously is the other thing, though. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, once they present it, you're just like, what? What is that? Everyone's both human and robot, then? Everything is?
It's the type of scheme, too, that would usually mark like a mad scientist in sci-fi as like especially monstrous.
Mm-hmm.
That we're going to turn everybody into robot people. But it's done by the hero.
Only way.
To every person alive. It's presented as a happy ending. And a not insignificant portion of the fandom regards it as the perfect ending. And I just, despise it. I like that there's an ending option there for me to despise that I never have to take. But man, if some people choose that, and that's the reason they like the Mass Effect 3 ending, then I'm like, that there's so few of us, but I cannot be on board with you. That is not. I hate that one. And Control is not much better. I mean, it's mechanically better, but also it's pretty explicitly this was the Elusive Man, the other bad guy's plan all along. Synthesis, almost what Saren was trying to pull off all along, but I don't like those. Like, the plan was to destroy the Reapers, and I think we should probably just do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, like, the end of this game has to be that. Like, he's a soldier. He's going to go do what a soldier does. He's going to accomplish his mission, which is, get rid of the bad guys. And there you have it. And okay, there's a price to pay. You lose ED. You lose the Geth. Unfortunate. Yeah. But there's not a lot of other options. That is what I do most of the time.
Yeah, and people were furious about this.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me is there's always anger on the idea that we did not, at the end of this, just incredibly sprawling saga. I mean, it's the most sprawling ever in some pretty literal ways with like the branching narratives. The idea that we didn't all get unique personalized endings there. There was a lot of ending around that. Because the great about this is that whichever color you choose there, between the red, the blue, and the green, you get basically the same
the final cinematic
video.
Is the same.
Yeah. With different colors, palettes. With cosmetic differences.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how that now conflicts with sort of the current promise / threat of AI, which is that it's close to providing each person with like instantly rendered, fully personalized movies for them to watch that no one else will ever see.
Mm-hmm.
And no one seems very keen on that either. But we were mad. Mass Effect players were mad that that's what we did not get from this video game series. And look, I mean, this is not a super strong ending, especially as it was originally.
Yep.
But what impressed me back in 2012, and it remains to impress me today, is how the huge backlash to that ending felt less like the anger of video game fans at a subpar Metroid sequel. And it was more the reaction that geeks have to when massive fantasy epics faceplant in their grand finales. And that's what makes it feel like the ending of Game of Thrones or of Lost, Dark Tower, perhaps. Some people,
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the Star Wars prequels and sequels are a different beast because they were hated prior to the ending.
Yeah, right.
Maybe like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy is a better comparison. Like the other thing, like with Lost or Game of Thrones, and Mass Effect, it's
Game of Thrones and Lost. Yeah. There's a long, like lengthy stories that played out over multiple years and multiple entries. That makes the most direct one-to-one sense. Yeah,
mm-hmm. And they're sort of coming off like strong points.
Yeah,
going into a sharp cliff of an ending. And that's a different thing. I think. I mean, I'll talk about Game of Thrones some here now. I'm a defender of that ending as I am of this one to a degree. I do despise Lost on a completely different level. The ending of that.
I also really don't like Lost. That's it. Yeah.
So maybe that's hypocrisy, but to me, it makes total sense that I defend Mass Effect 3 and Game of Thrones for failing by taking a swing that is challenging to the audience, and Lost, meanwhile, is punting.
It takes a swing. It's just a very bad swing.
It knows that it lets audience down because it was playing a carny game for years, and it tries to avoid that backlash to that by pandering to the audience as hard and sappily as possible. It makes the finale into a YouTube shipper video, and that to me is so. It's not just that it's poorly implemented or executed; it's also just cowardly in a way that I really I hold it profoundly in contempt.
That's going to be a new thing for us, I think.
That's my new favorite insult. Yeah.
It's good, yeah.
Now, Mass Effect and Game of Thrones, on the other hand, try, look, geeks, I don't speak from the outside here. Geeks, we are, by and large, entitled whiners. But gamer geeks take the entitlement to a whole different level.
I don't know. We're in a new age, a brave new era of whiny geeks now, though, I feel like. I feel like, I don't know. I guess Mass Effect is sort of a watershed moment for whining on the internet about things. So I don't know. I guess it's always been there, but yeah, video game geeks, we got our priorities out of whack a lot of the times in the past, and this might be the best example of it.
Yeah, 2012 was just a time there where the geeks had fully taken over pop culture, but it hadn't sunk in yet, and sort of, I don't know, internet culture. The cancellation phenomenon, or the public shaming aspect of it. This now is kind of like a documented, studied phenomenon. It was still pretty new there, and we were still surprised at how far a Twitter campaign could take you, to the point of, well, maybe we can get this video game studio to write us a whole new ending and to release it. They kind of got that. Ultimately, turns out caving into the worst people on the internet as criticisms of your art or your product doesn't tend to help much. I would point to Rise of Skywalker as another example of that.
Ooh. Yeah. Doubling down on all the bad stuff, really.
Yeah.
But
in this case, actually, it did help, the extended cut. I mean,
the extended cut of this is an improvement, I have to admit. Yeah. As somebody who doesn't hate the ending of this, but my first time through, I remember finding it unsatisfying in ways I couldn't entirely explicate.
Yeah.
With time and replays, I've been able to figure it out more and say exactly what it is. And I think it's largely execution. And they kind of fix the execution with the new ending.
Right. That's the thing. They didn't change the content.
Yeah.
I mean, they add the reject ending, but they give you a middle finger for choosing it. Which I still choose it anyway. I like it. It's a very bleak, but I don't know. I find something poetic about it. I'm fine with it. Even though I remember it hit me like a glass of ice water the first time I chose it. But as I'm going through double playthroughs this time, I'm going to choose Destroy in one of them. I'm definitely not choosing Synthesis, so screw it. But
the post credits, the post choice, you still have the dumb thing of the Normandy escaping the blast or whatever, the color wave, and landing on a planet, and it's a remarkably unsatisfying final cinematic for this franchise. It's kind of staggering. You're just like, that's fucking it. I don't even get to see what happens to everybody. That sucks. Then they add like a little 4-minute video where they take you through what happened, and that makes all the difference in the world to me. It's a big
you have Lance Henriksen narrating the denouement.
Well, or you have Trisha Helfer, or you have your Shepherd. It's different for each one. Mm-hmm. The Synthesis ending's actually great. The Synthesis finale has a really good one, which is Edie talking about how things work now. And it doesn't answer all your questions, but it answers some of them, and it's it's good. It's actually it has at least the emotional intent that they wanted with the transhumanism ending comes out a lot more clearly. As opposed to this sort of esoteric nonsense, which is what it is in the original cut. Here, at least, they're like, okay, so it is about life. It is about moving forward. Here's how that works practically. You get confirmation that all the Mass Effects blow up, which should technically mean that no one can travel interstellar anymore. But apparently that's not the case. Everything worked out fine. Things are all right. No one was stranded in Earth. It's okay.
Yeah, they're rebuilding. But that's what, maybe we'll talk about this more in the adaptation. That's the reject ending. I kind of like stranding everybody at Earth as a setup for the future. But, you talked about the Normandy crash thing. That was a big point of contention. I mean, not point of contention. Everybody acknowledged, even those of us that were more positive, it doesn't make any sense that the Normandy is suddenly fleeing this battle. The extended cut just adds at least Lance Henriksen ordering everybody, when the Crucible's activated, everybody break off, go to the rendezvous point. So there's a context for why they're fleeing, at least. that's a huge thing. This is one of the things to compare it to Game of Thrones. I think there's a lot of comparisons to make there. The lesson from both of these, I think, is if you're at your end of your very sprawling epic saga, the fandom is full of geeks. If you're going to throw some sort of curveball at them, that's going to be upsetting and not give them the perfect happy ending that they're hoping for. You really need to get the execution watertight, because if you do mess up the execution on top of doing something difficult thematically, the way this and Game of Thrones do, then not only will people hate it, but they'll like have a built-in excuse to never have to like really examine it again more deeply,
or engage with it,
they don't engage with it at all, and they'll seize on. They won't even talk about the interesting part of it because they'll seize on the execution stuff that is sort of more easily identifiable.
Well, this is Game of Thrones. This is, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's, I think there's similarities there that these are both incredibly complicated lifts. These things are attempting even more than they're given credit for, and that's true for a way, like for Star Wars or the Marvel movies, for example. Like they just make things look easy, so easy that they fool people into thinking they're more simple than they are. But Game of Thrones and Mass Effect are on a whole nother level. And what they're doing does look harder. It shows the difficulty in some more apparent ways. But I think people still take for granted just how incredibly complex the plotting and world building that's going into this is, because it comes across pretty clearly.
They think of this as Star Wars, and it's not. Star Wars is nowhere near the level of sophistication when it comes to world building or having thought this through. I mean, it just isn't. Yeah. I mean, it can't be.
It's also not outside of Knights of the Republic. It's not trying to do choose your own adventure.
Right.
Story. Mm-hmm. No one's ever tried to take up this mantle to do choose your own adventure prestige storytelling. It's tough. Even Bioware with the Dragon Age thing, those are the individual entries are a lot more disconnected from each other.
Very, yeah. Uh-huh. And I think only the original Dragon Age even comes close, I think, when it comes to this specific thing.
Yeah. But it's also confined to one game. So it has more freedom to move than the other games. And Game of Thrones, people recognize that those are complicated books, but I don't think people credit properly just how the insane depth of the world building there that some other fantasy things have, but also the commitment to the realism, the more, we're not going to play out fantasy tropes normally. Everything has to be spun around or put on its head. And that gets more and more difficult as you go along, on top of just the sprawl of the scope of it. It spans continents and multiple nations and hundreds of characters, and how they all have to pay off in some way.
Well, how do you do an ending that defies storytelling expectation and convention?
It has to pay things off satisfying, but also part of Game of Thrones convention is it has to also contain a big twist that is upsetting. So
it does that. It does that. I actually think if you watch Game of Thrones now, it's blaringly obvious what the story is. Like where these characters are headed. It is well, of fucking course, that's Daenerys' story. That's the only place it really could have realistically gone, given the worldview and the way it's been set up. It makes total sense, but it didn't work that way.
That's what I think. But also, I know that people who disagree, who had an initial bad reaction to it, are never going to are just not going to engage with that. And they're just going to say, well, but it's stupid that people were moving around the map too fast now.
And it is, but yeah.
And it is. That's a problem. I get that. And this is probably Mass Effect 2, or Mass Effect also, that a lot of the anger at the Destroy ending in particular, I think was rooted in people just not liking the cost associated with it. And
I think it's simple as they didn't like that Shepard dies. I think it's that.
Oh, simple. I think people were more okay with that than they were with killing Edie and the Geth. It's you've gone through the trouble of saving the Geth.
I think gamers want total victory at the end. I think, I put all this time in, I deserve to win. I think is
right, but that's what. Yeah. I don't know that Shepard living or dying.
Oh, they want Shepard
is as big of a piece of that as this. I should have been able to save this other person. I mean, I think you're right. The Destroy ending can have Shepard live though, and that doesn't seem to ameliorate it. The reaction very much.
Did you? I always remember I saw what we're talking about. There's a cut scene at the very end. If you have enough war asset points and you choose Destroy, of the camera panning over, a sort of, is it a pile of dead keepers or something like that, and
Just
finding
rubble.
Shepard's body, and then it sort of twitches, and then it cuts
you see like the shoulder of Shepard's armor sticking out of the rubble, and then you just see him like inhale, like take a breath, like the shoulder raises a little bit as it takes a single breath. I like that. It's cool.
It is. And it's nice. One of the developers in one of the interviews, I forget which one, was saying like, well, maybe he's alive, or maybe it's the last gasp of a man on a ship that's about to explode. We don't really give you context there, which is a pretty good fuck you as well. They wanted him dead. They definitely wanted this to end with Shepard dying.
Yes, which is fine, I think. But here's the point I'm trying to get at here.
I'm fine with it too.
Is there's a part here where the gamers, as much as I'm denigrating them, they're also reacting. The game has taught them how to play the game. And this, in the finale, changes the rules of how choices in Mass Effect are supposed to work. Where, in the first game, Kaidan versus Ashley is a very stark choice, but it's your choice. And even up to Mass Effect 3, that if you can't make peace between the Quarians and the Geth, it's taking that same concept and blowing up the scale. You can say one or the other. And the game isn't really going to punish you either way. I mean, you're going to lose something, and that is a sort of scripted, sacrifice. But you don't lose anything going forward. Kaidan and Ashley are functional equivalents on your team. They have different abilities, but you're not appreciably weaker for choosing one or the other. And there's no corresponding option among these endings where choosing destroy would kill off the Geth and Edie, but choosing control would have the effect of killing off all the Turians. That's the type of sacrifice we've been conditioned to accept in these games. And that lack of choice, or at least the lack of carefully counterbalanced choices with the scales loaded up with functional equivalents on both sides, I like that as an artistic decision. But I admit it is antithetical to what Mass Effect has been doing and selling to us all along up to this point. I choose to look at that as an artistic decision rather than a failure in game design. Maybe there's some level on which that's 6 in one hand and half a dozen in the other. How many artistic choices in any medium have ever been made that are not dictated or at least influenced by constraints in time or logistics in their creation?
It is that, but it is also. Well, that seems like that's always the case with BioWare under EA, but less so with these than with the Dragon Age games. This really feels like the ending they wanted, for better or worse. Maybe the execution wasn't what they wanted, but this is how they wanted to end this ultimately, where they landed. Whether it was always the plan or not, probably not. But this feels like an auteur's ending, in a sense. And I think that's what sucks for people. I think that, it's not what's been promised by this Star Wars shaped package, that this is like a literary ending of sorts that is about themes and ideas and doesn't really, fulfill the promise of the previous 80 hours or whatever you've put into it. So that's frustrating. Obviously.
Yeah, I must say, I do think this, you're right, is an auteur's ending. And I also want to note that is a term that carries a lot of prestige with it. But an auteur's ending can suck ass.
Of course.
It comes to that territory. That it doesn't mean it's great.
I don't think this sucks ass, though. I think
I don't think it does. But I'm saying just calling it that does not mean that it is brilliant on its own merits.
Without a doubt,
it just means that it is singular, which again sort of cuts against what we've been promised here, which is everything to everybody.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I mean, what would the opposite be of an auteur's? Rise of Skywalker would be the opposite of an auteur's ending. But what's a successful one? What's a successful
non-auteur ending? Return of the Jedi.
I guess so. Yeah. That is just what everyone wants. Here you go. And there are people who are just who bristle against that. We're just did they all need to fucking live? Did Lando need to live? That is sort of the beginning of people being wait a minute, Star Wars. I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe Avengers Endgame is the ultimate example, the most successful version that.
Yeah.
Even that.
Even the people
they kill off Iron Man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And kind of kill off Captain America, although he also kind of just goes to heaven. So, I don't know. But I think you can make there's some elements to that I think are have a tinge of auteurism to them, but that's probably the example of just purely crowd pleasing, checking all the boxes. You know, I don't know. I would say like Harry Potter's up there as far as like,
yeah, that's a good call actually.
That's the I think that's the still that and Endgame are up there, but on a purely plot level of checking off all the plot boxes that have been strewn over decades of prior storytelling.
Right,
those are like mechanically the most satisfying of any of these big endings. This makes sense. It's trying for something different, and you know what? I think half the endings do not function unless you subscribe to the indoctrination theory.
Okay, let's talk about this. I have very little patience for this. I'll be honest. This is fantastic.
I got all the time in the world for it.
Okay, this is like I don't like the ending here. I'm going to fix it in my head. Kind of one of those things, which we as geeks are prone to collectively.
Okay. All right, we got to do a quick run through of what this is. So, indoctrination is the process the Reapers use to brainwash people. If you're exposed to Reaper technology, they did it to Saren, they downed out the Elusive Man. You gradually over time get sort of mentally controlled by them, and then you start working against your own people. And that's one of the biggest threats of the Reapers. Now, there's a question sort of hanging out there as Shepard's had more exposure to Reapers than a lot of people throughout the series. Why are they not ever struggling with this? And the theory goes that he is, and the finale, after he gets blasted by the Reaper beam, is all just in Shepard's head playing out the Reaper's attempt to brainwash him finally. And that if you choose the destroy ending, you resist the brainwashing and destroy the Reapers, and that's how Shepard is able to actually live. If you choose the control or the synthesis ending, you are submitted to their plans, and now they control you. Now, there's, in terms of like textual evidence for this, there's a lot of stuff that gets weird in the final segment here, and it's all stuff that's like, again, because the execution of this was not watertight, especially to start with, a lot of it can be brushed off. But what proponents will point to is stuff like your gun has infinite ammo after you get up and you're mangled, which is just different than everything else. That Shepard, after you shoot Anderson in the side of his belly, after that, Shepard appears to have a new wound. They're looking down, like clutching their side in the same spot, look down, their arms covered in fresh blood from it. Another thing that I like in Mass Effect 1, when you're talking to the Rachni Queen, and she's sort of talking about how the Rachni were sort of goaded into attacking the rest of the galaxy through Reaper indoctrination. You don't kind of know exactly what she's talking about at the time because you haven't revealed everything yet, but she talks about what the Rachni talk about everything in terms of songs. All their communication is songs, and she talks about songs like oily black shadows. And in now Mass Effect 3, flash forward, when you have those dream sequences where you run through the forest after the kid that will be the Star Child, it is the trees are these oily black shadows that are like moving in oily ways. And once you get up and the Elusive Man's like using his powers on you, there is these sort of black tendrils that will come in the side of the screen. Maybe that's just cinematic effect, but it kind of lines up. Another thing to point out, if you don't do the like renegade interrupt to stop the Elusive Man from shooting Anderson, he doesn't just kill Anderson. It's like a game over state. You have to reload.
Yeah, right.
There's some other stuff. I mean, just about like, how did Anderson get up to the Citadel with you, and how come he didn't land in the same place as you? Like, that doesn't make much sense.
And the Elusive Man, yeah,
yeah. Well, the Elusive Man had supposedly gone there before it moved to Earth.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm not counting that one.
Sure.
Also, in all of the ending cutscenes, the blasts that go around the galaxy and the galaxy map showing like all the relation to the story doesn't start in the local cluster at Earth. It starts on the edge of the galaxy map, which I guess is kind of where the Arrival DLC took place. I don't know about that. And then, of course, when you pick Destroy or Reject, the catalyst changes like from the gentle child voice to the Harbinger voice growling, "So be it." And if you pick Control, Shepard's eyes turn the same like electric blue that Saren and the Elusive Man's did when they were fully indoctrinated. Mm-hmm. That's the short rundown of the evidence that people cite.
Here's my take on this. You cannot convince me that this was intended. You cannot convince me that BioWare wanted this ending or intended this or had any inkling that it would be taken this way. There would be way more there. And because of that, it is just like it is a fan.
A no for you, dog.
It is a no for me, dog. Yes. It is completely just like, this ending sucks. I will fix this in my head somehow. But
who cares if the ending, if that fix works? Does that really matter?
Well, I mean, I would consciously be aware that it was something I was imposing on it, which is tough for me. I would rather be disappointed by a story than make up a new version of it, I think, and believe that. I think. I mean, maybe that's a failing on my part.
I think I can do both. At least sometimes. I mean, there's a degree like this. It's so much centered on the fight on the last bit of the game. I'm like, part of this is it's a type of twist I profess to hate too.
Yeah,
it's all in their head type of ending.
Mm-hmm. There's precedent because of indoctrination. Fine,
right?
But I don't know. It's like, I know the actual ending of Breaking Bad is Walter White dies in that car, and the rest of the last 2 episodes are a death dream. I'm just like, that's fucking stupid. No, it's not at all what is intended by the creators, and I don't know. It doesn't make it more satisfying for me in any way.
Well, or even if they were kind of conscious of that and trying that, almost the Breaking Bad example just comes across as a bit of hedging on their part. Maybe is that not committing. Here, there are aspects of it that I think that I'll get into. I think are so interesting that I kind of am more interested in entertaining it than I am in other contexts. I almost full disclosure. I don't think this theory entirely holds up because at least one of the writers has flat out said it wasn't what they were doing. But there are many writers working on the series, and sometimes they're working at cross purposes, like the guy who thought it was all going to be about dark energy. And I think there are too many pieces of it that seemed deliberately placed, like the early shadow stuff, for it to be entirely coincidence. I think it's something that was at least toyed with by some people during production, at some point in production, but I don't think it ever got implemented entirely. And that actually leaves it in kind of an interesting place. But the counterpoint also too is if this is all hallucination, then the series actually ends with nothing being resolved. The Reapers are going to all this effort to brainwash a chunk of melting flesh that will be dead in minutes anyway. Now, I guess you could do a no prize explanation there that if it's hallucination, it's just
if the destroy ending is the right ending, then the right thing to do, then he has achieved his goal, even if his perception of what is going on is not accurate. Even if the indoctrination that we're seeing is not right, then it still has a win state. Maybe more so than I think that's what it really comes down to, is that people want more of a win state.
Well, the theory, the other, I guess, the big element, the biggest piece of evidence for it is that the win state is, if you choose destroy, that's the one where Shepard takes a breath and lives. And
if you have enough war assets.
Right. You have enough war assets. And I guess there's a version of this where that is Shepard lying in the rubble on Earth and not on the Citadel. But again, that just sort of leaves things uncompleted. So I don't like that. But I do like the idea, whether it was intended or not, that this final test thing it's the Reaper intelligence trying to brainwash you out of actually going through with the destroy ending.
Yeah.
And
that's okay.
The way they construct that, if it were real, would be brilliant and kind of diabolical in how it uses the game mechanics against the players to sort of simulate the effects of brainwashing that the player would not have been experiencing because they have not experienced any actual Reaper tech.
You're making a good argument because the ending they want is coded blue, and the bad ending and the ending they don't want is red.
Yes, they swapped the renegade color palette, Paragon color palettes, so that Anderson is now in the red renegade state and the Elusive Man is in the blue Paragon state, and that's messing with your indicators.
I always thought that was just clumsy. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay.
Well, and it's the renegade version is the version where some people die, and the blue version is the version where everybody lives. Is how I sort of interpreted at the time.
Right.
And also trying to indicate to to us that by requiring a higher gamer score, but one that almost everybody will actually have if they get here, to unlock the control and the synthesis options, codes them as better endings to us, to our gamer brains, and destroy as the most basic and worst of the options. That, I love that idea, even if they stumbled upon it completely by accident. That because if the final
you're making me like this. I don't like that though. That you're winning me over on this. I hate that now.
But to leave it in a state to like confirm it ever,
right? To
have one ending confirms that the others are bad, then it means nobody will ever like. It creates a thing now where actually a gamer, even in 2024, going through it all for the fourth time, if the final battle is to see whether Shepard is brainwashed in their most vulnerable state or not, the gamers could still lose that battle in a way that I just never would if I know exactly what the parameters are and those stakes are.
It would be stunning if this is intended and they have just a little bit more to actually land this. Like if they actually had something in the game to indicate this is what was going on, it would really be amazing, but they don't.
I mentioned a few of the things that they have in there, but the problem with that is the execution is also
right. Well, shoddy
not
execution,
clumsy. So having the blast originate from a system that's not the Earth system, that feels like just clumsy and not something that really plays into the brainwashing element. And having the Normandy suddenly on the other side of the solar system and fleeing was just clumsy and not something that was deliberately, unreal. And there's definitely was enough genuine clumsiness there that you can't really confirm it. But if you could confirm it, then it would ruin the whole effect in my head. That's why I think you actually have to have the other cinematics play out as happy endings. Right. Shepard, if Shepard succumbs to it, it's the Minority Report ending where he thinks he's in the happy. He got the happy ending, even if everybody was killed.
I mean, it's cool. It's a cool idea, and as you walk me through it, I have a little more respect for it than I did. But ultimately, it's not the ending of Mass Effect. I'm afraid. It's maybe a better ending if well executed, but there's a lot of maybe better endings. So that doesn't make it special.
But it's just such a unique thing. Like I can't think of another video game that
is good.
That could do that.
There's more there than I thought. Okay.
Yeah, that could do anything like that. That has to have like brainwashing as an element, but also, again, I'm fascinated with the idea of using the language of video games that it's built up as a way of indoctrinating us. Just simply because that's the thing. You can't. How do you dramatize a player character being brainwashed by effects that the player will not actually experience? They'll just know better than our avatar, and that will be hugely frustrating. But if you use the way things are unlocked in the Paragon Renegade system, and just coding as well, the ending that you were aiming for is one where some of your friends die, and nobody dies in the other version. The instinct to beat the game, quote unquote, beat it, pushes us towards taking the other paths in ways that I think that's a fascinating idea. And next time we'll talk about how we could possibly try to adapt it to a television context.
Yes. We're not done talking about Mass Effect. we have a whole nother and this it's probably going to be a sizable one. I have a lot of thoughts about how you bring this home as a series and kind of just the shape of the television version as a whole, which is just, it's still something I want so much. Like if you ask me what IP I want adapted more than anything, it's this. It's still this. Yeah. It's more than the Dark Tower. This is what I want them to do, and we have a lot of ideas about how.
Yeah, I'm more convinced than ever, having talked to you now, that yes, this could be something truly great.
It's money left on the table. Honestly, this could be the next big thing. Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe I think there's more chance now than there ever has been of it happening. I mean, video game adaptations are becoming quite profitable and good in some cases.
And more prestige,
Yeah, it can be done now. And if I were Jeff Bezos, and I wasn't mired in a Lord of the Rings of Power boondoggle, this is where I'd be looking to my to a next big thing, next big show that wants to take over the world. Yeah.
That's my campaign slogan. We need new deranged billionaires.
Yeah. Oh, no kidding. All right, so we'll talk about that next time. Thank you for joining us for this in-depth look at the end of Mass Effect 3.